still like eats at me. All right, well, I'm sure some other people will mosey on in. My buddy wrote me define cold. So I struggle with how to set this up sometimes in my little presentation software here because I want to be able to show all the slides, but I have these notes and notes within, slides within notes and whatever, so I'm not sure this is the best way to have done this, but I'm going to try and flip through these slides, but if I make a mistake, I apologize in advance. See, I don't even know where they start because I have 30 pages of this.
It's not your fault, it's the cold.
Oh, sure, yeah, we'll blame everything on the cold today. Like, no worries. That's the easy out clause. So we are in Mark 5. Let me go ahead and open us with a word of prayer, and then we'll get going. Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity to gather together to open your word, to read this incredible, interconnected story, and to continue to meditate on your Son's power over creation, over the demons, over disease, and even over death. We ask that you give us eyes to see, ears that hear, and hearts to understand. We ask in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. So I'm going to just begin like normal and read through the passage. It's a little bit longer than some of our normal sections. It will, I think, take us all the way to the end of chapter 5, which is great. So we're continuing to make our way through. Once again, I don't know why I keep forgetting this, but I have the study guide prepared. I just forgot to print it. So I'll do the same thing. I will put it online for anybody who wants to read it. It's on that. If you go to our website, there's an adult catechesis section, and all the study guides and all the videos for Mark are there, and I'm working on getting previous lessons there as well, or previous I don't know what you call these instances of adult catechesis in there as well. So let me read through this. Like I said, if I might have to, if I pause, it's because I'm trying to skip past some slides that I wrote within slides, but I'm sure we'll be okay. This is Mark 5:21 to 43. And when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be made well and alive." And he went with him. And a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered much under many physicians, and spent all that she had, and had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and came up behind him in the crowd, and touched his garment. For she said, "If I touch even his garments, I will be made well." And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, immediately perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house some who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." And he allowed for no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. They came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Jesus saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. And when he had entered, he said to them, "Why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. But he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in where the child was. Taking her by the hand, he said to her, "Talitha kumi," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." And immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age. And they were immediately overcome with amazement. And he strictly charged them that no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat. All right, what stands out to you here? There is lots of stuff here. Yep.
Both of them, do you want us to go both together or split it up?
No, both together for sure.
Okay. Both of them knelt before him, and both of them had great faith that just a touch, not a long prayer, but just a touch would heal his daughter and the lady. Both of them had great faith.
Yeah, faith is a big element here. You're right to see obvious connections between these two texts. This is the classic example of what's known as intercalation. This sandwiching is the non-technical term that we see in many ways all throughout the Gospel of Mark. What's interesting is usually Matthew and Luke disassemble Mark's intercalation. The Malachi quote, like remember how the opening section goes like, as it written the prophet Isaiah, and then it quotes Malachi, and then it quotes Isaiah, so there's that sandwiching. Matthew just has them in two different, the Malachi quote and the Isaiah quote in two different sections. We'll see this later, but there's a scene later in Mark's gospel where Mark comes and, Jesus comes and curses a fig tree, and then he walks in the temple and he cleanses the temple, and then he comes back to the fig tree and finds the fig tree withered. Like for Mark, the two scenes are interpreting each other. That's intercalation. Matthew just completely separates the two scenes one from another. This is unique or interesting in the fact that the intercalation sticks through Matthew and Luke. So in their parallel accounts of this, they have the same feature, even though they don't make a big deal of it. But it sort of, I think, suggests or shows just how kind of interwoven these two stories are, that Matthew and Luke didn't feel like they could separate them out. The two stories did probably exist separately at some point, because the opening scene and the closing scene, the Jairus' daughter and finding out she's sick and the raising of his daughter, the Greek style is one thing. The type of verbs that get used predominantly are sort of one style, and then in the healing of the woman, it's a completely different style, which suggests that it's probably not it wasn't originally composed as one thing, but something about these two scenes seemed to suggest to Mark, or maybe Mark already got them put together, however that works, but that they are sort of integrally connected in such a way that they should not really they should not be separated. You already mentioned prayer and faith and belief in God. What else connects these two? Yeah. Yeah, sorry.
The skepticism in each, the people who are closest to Jesus, who are trying to keep him on schedule, keep the service running, keep the trains going, they're the ones who say, "Come on, all these people pressing on. What do you mean, who touched you?" They're too busy doing their job to see what Jesus is doing, and then we don't know. It doesn't say exactly who was laughing at him in the second episode, but presumably it was somebody who was close and had some authority and should. So it seems like when you're in proximity to all kinds of religious stuff, you can lose sight of the real power and focus on, the routine.
Yeah. One of the consistent arguments, or one of the, I think, better arguments for the Gospels being based on eyewitness testimony and not just sort of total fiction that the early church created later, are verses just like this, where the disciples sound like real people, and you think, boy, if you were a disciple of Jesus and we're now kind of creating this story, creating this myth, would you really make yourself sound so kind of foolish where you're, sort of rebuking Jesus? You see this is really, like, maybe it's just my own kind of sarcastic nature, but I read this, like, you see the crowd pressing around you and yet you say, who touched me? They're not coming off very well. I think it's also worth pointing out, because of our belief rightly in high Christology, in the divine nature of Jesus, we do have a tendency to read the Gospels in an overly docetic way, which, if you don't know what that means, docetism is a heresy that says that Jesus only appeared to be human, that he was just this really divine figure and only appeared to be human. But the Jesus in this story the disciples come off very human, Jesus comes off very human. He's not touched and like, bam, I know who it was because I have this divine insight. And he's looking around, he's trying to figure out who it is. This is the next verse, and he looked around to see who had done it. This isn't, in other texts you hear things like and he knew what they were thinking, right? And it comes off like this divine being who has omniscience of everything that's happening around him. This is a very human side of Jesus who's looking around and just trying to figure out, like, hey, I just felt this happen. What's actually happened? What else connects the stories? That's a great place to start. Yeah.
The woman had been suffering from her illness for 12 years.
Uh-huh.
The daughter is 12 years old.
The woman has been suffering for 12 years. The daughter's 12 years old. So the woman started suffering the same year, presumably, that the daughter was born. I've been arguing that lots of these stories have, and explicitly and implicitly, direct connection to the Isaianic New Exodus, the return from exile, the fulfillment of the promises to Israel. Is the number 12 meaningful at all in the story of Israel? Yeah, never heard of it, right? Yeah, that seems to be not in incidental detail that the number 12 pops up here and binds the two passages together. Mark seems to use healing stories to make theological points about the people, right? The people to whom Jesus is speaking. So the way section, in which the way of the Lord becomes the way of the cross, and Jesus begins to tell them clearly that he's going to suffer and die and rise again when he gets to Jerusalem. It's blanketed by stories on both sides of Jesus healing blindness. Right? Now, yes, these are real stories, but for Mark, they also need to be suggestive of the state of Israel, that Israel needs to be healed from its blindness in order to properly understand what it is that has been accomplished in Jesus and what he's trying to tell his people. I think you can make the same case here. Both of these people, she's 12 years old, the woman's been suffering with this for 12 years. They are both also ritually unclean. Ritually unclean. So the woman is unclean via the nature of the flow of blood, which you can read about. I had it here in Leviticus 15, 25 to 27. If you want to, I have no interest in reading this. But the girl is unclean because she's dead, right? Dead bodies are by definition unclean, and you can see that in Numbers 19, 11 through 22. Contact with an unclean corpse, or a corpse, caused 7 days of uncleanness, required ritual purification. I think for Mark, these two stories tied together it's Mark's way of saying Israel is unclean and perpetually sick. And for Israel, 12, to be restored, to be made whole, it's going to take miraculous power. It's going to take his life-giving power to make her clean, and eventually to give life back to what is dead. Yeah, Father?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think coincidentally, this passage coincides with the Walking with Jesus passage that we read this morning, Matthew 10. And it's interesting, it came to mind how Matthew's narrative is so much shorter than Mark's, which is usually the other way around, I think.
Nope.
No?
No.
Mark.
So Matthew has more stories,
Okay.
and Luke, but Mark's account are almost always more detailed
Okay.
and longer,
Yeah.
which is why that's part of the argument for Markan priority,
Okay.
that you would be more inclined to reduce sort of these extra details than you would be to add them in.
Okay. Well, anyhow, so in Matthew's account, it says that it doesn't mention Jairus' name, but it says just, and it says that she's already dead
Right.
by the time. So it's
Yeah.
interesting to me that so the detail is not the fact that she was. The detail that's missing from Matthew's, it seems to be that is not important to the gist of the story, which is that she was dead and he raised her from the dead. Not that she had been ill
Yeah.
and he was delayed in getting there. So it seemed like that detail, it's interesting to say that detail is not important to the gist of what the evangelists are coming across.
Yeah, at least as Matthew tells it, right? Mark, I mean, it's if you want to get into like the history of the text, it seems as if someone or Mark has had a story in which girl gets sick and then girl dies and Jesus raised her from the dead, and needed something to explain sort of the gap in time and puts this story here. And then Matthew doesn't sort of need all this extraness and just sort of flattens out to girl is dead, on his way.
Right.
Jesus meets one who is unclean. Yeah. Either way, in either text, it's sickness and death, right? And
Yeah,
little
that's
girls
what-
don't typically just drop dead, so you can presume that she was probably sick somehow as well. But either in both Matthew and Mark, and that's, I don't know if you're intending this, but you are making the point that sometimes we can get caught up in, and I do this too, I make like whole theological points based on one little word, but we can get caught up in like the details when sometimes it's just the broad strokes, right? It's even, like, you think about Jesus's words, right? And we have, we like, parse the verbs and diagram the sentences and do all this, and then he spoke Aramaic. So he didn't make any point using the perfect passive participle in Greek, right? Like he never actually did this. He was speaking in different language and someone's translated it into this, and there's this kind of gap there. So either way, it's a good point to sort of, especially where there's parallel passages. One, they're not always the same. There's usually differences between them. And two, oftentimes reading for broad strokes is great. Reading for the details that differ between the Gospels, this is what we call redaction criticism, but that's actually often illuminating for what Mark is trying to do, or what Matthew's trying to do, or what Luke is trying to do, right? So if you know what Mark had, and then Luke takes Mark and makes it, if Mark has X and then Luke makes it Y, the differences between the two often give clues of Luke's priorities, of what Luke thinks matters here, that sort of thing, right? So, this is why I love gospel studies. It is so intricate and so confusing and so layered, and I love it. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, shoot.
So, you mentioned they're not,
Louder, please.
what? Oh, gosh.
Is your mic on? I can't.
Yeah, it should be on.
It's
Is the
on.
little
Okay.
light on?
Yeah, a lot of, So, in
This
terms
little
of
light of mine.
translating, they're not even translating from Aramaic, they're rendering in Greek, a paraphrase, and I mean, probably.
Yeah, probably.
That's what you did in antiquity. It's
Probably.
like, it's not like, you read Pericles' funeral speech in Thucydides, and you're getting somebody there writing it shorthand.
That's
They're
right.
Reconstructing it.
That's
And-
correct.
And that's probably what they're doing here.
That's correct. That's correct. So, what? Yeah, John.
No, just maybe a historical question here, but I think it leads to some spiritual issue. But Jairus,
Not always important.
right? Jairus, a ruler of the synagogue.
Yeah.
And does that make him a Pharisee?
No. Archisynagogas were not. They were not necessarily like rabbis or Pharisees. They were just lay people who kind of oversaw the building. Honestly, they
Like vestry.
yeah, I was gonna say they're probably like a junior warden. I mean, that's in the sense that the junior warden sort of cares for the building. That they had a sort of they had a position in the community. They were known, but not necessarily powerful. They weren't the teacher. They weren't the spiritual authority, but they maintained the space that everyone else would have a place to come in.
So
and
I
worship
find the
and-
word ruler somewhat different from the standpoint of, let's say, the word official of the synagogue versus, ruler sounds like a very high authority.
Yeah, that's a
And
good
I don't
point.
want to belabor this. We don't have to go.
No. I mean, no, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. Should we call it the junior ruler? Should we change the position to junior ruler?
Our junior warden thinks we should start calling her ruler.
Ruler, yeah. I guess I think leader probably be a better word. I mean, it's not like archisynagogas is not it's not like kurios synagogos. It's not lord of the synagogue or something like that. Like it's just chief, head, something like that. Mary Lou?
I have a couple of just comments.
Let's go.
The first one is that when the woman was approaching Jesus, it says here that in verse 27, she had heard many reports
Yeah.
about Jesus.
Yeah.
And so she had faith, but she had faith from hearing, which is what Paul tells us in Romans 2, that faith comes from hearing and hearing from the word. So I found that interesting. And then, so she had faith, but then if we come over to, let's see, verse 36, it says, do not fear, only believe. And I found that interesting, that it didn't say, don't grieve that she's gone, but it was do not fear.
Yeah.
So
What verse was that?
36.
Yeah.
And then one of the connections that I made kind of personally through this is sometimes we get healing here on earth, but sometimes the healing doesn't come until there's resurrection. And the little girl was really resurrected this side of heaven, but it just kind of how I connected it.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, they're both connected by faith. They're both connected by when he says your faith has made you well, and your faith, tells Jairus to have faith. The save word is that healed and save are the same word is what I'm getting at. Sorry, I'm stumbling over that. But they're both sozo. Like it's only by context that you parse out. We were talking about sort of physical healing, and we were talking about like spiritual salvation, which I think is again suggested that the two are kind of interconnected here for sure. The part about hearing is great. There's we should. I kind of prayed about this, but I didn't mention it from the start. But there's a pattern kind of going on here. After the parables, Jesus gets in the boat, and when this is the first sort of sign of his power, and it ends with the disciples asking, who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? And that question continues to be answered throughout chapter 5. Beginning of chapter 5, he crosses to the shore, and the demon comes running to him. So he's shown that he has power over creation. In the next story, he shows that he has power over the demonic realm. And then he crosses again in the boat to a different shore. It's not a demon that comes running to him, but it doesn't say he ran, but the crowd comes and Jairus comes pushing through them. Now he's going to show that he has power over disease and death, right? So we're still answering the question, who then is this? That's what Mark is trying to get you to sort of wrestle with. This is why, again, I don't mean to harp on this, but I just know, especially with Easter approaching, we hear this I want to call it dumb, but there's got to be a more polite word for it. But we hear this sort of phrase that, well, like the earliest church, there's a like Bart Ehrman will go on TV and say the Synoptic Gospels don't show, Jesus doesn't claim to be God, they don't show Jesus as God in the Synoptic Gospels. And it's only later in the Gospel of John, after high Christology has developed for a bit, that the sort of purely human rabbi teacher of Matthew, Mark, and Luke is turned into a divine figure in John. And I just keep thinking, like, what Gospels are you reading? Because this whole section from the end of chapter 4, the last sentence, who then is this, all the way through chapter 5, is trying to get us to ask the question, who is this? This is not the scholar's way of someone saying, this is a divine being, this is God in person. This is a deeply Jewish way of saying this is God in person, this is a divine being, because Jesus is doing things, as the disciples rightly point out by their question, that only God can do. Yeah.
One example of that in the stories we're looking at is it's merely Jesus's touch that brings about the healing. Not even the touch, just his clothing. In one
Yeah.
case, he doesn't have to do anything. It's
Yeah.
just the woman comes up to him, she's healed.
Yep.
And then when he sees Jairus' daughter, he
Takes her by the hand.
He just takes her by the hand and says, hey, get up.
Yep.
He doesn't, there's no incantation. He's not a magician.
Right.
He just is. And
That's actually an incredibly important part of this. There is no incantation. The words he speaks to her are just the words that a father or loving adult might say to a little girl who's fallen asleep on the couch or something and needs to get up. And it brings her back to life. There is a story in the Old Testament very similar to this. Does anybody know what I'm thinking of? Or am I going to sit here and... What? Yeah, Elisha and the Shunammite's son. To your point, do you remember what Elisha does for the son? Yeah, and as I was reading this again last night, I was just thinking, if that's what it takes for someone to, lips to lips, eyes to eyes, maybe just let me go. I don't know that I want to wake up like this. I might be more terrified than otherwise. But, Elisha sort of goes through these theatrics. If you remember from that text, Elisha, at one point says, she's coming to me and the Lord is hidden from me of what's going on. Elisha obviously raises her from the dead, but he's sort of unsure. He's not entirely clear about what's happening, where Jesus seems very in control of this whole thing. He doesn't have to lay on her. He doesn't have to go through all these theatrics. He just takes her hand and speaks the common phrase that you would say to a little girl to get up from the couch or from her bed, and she comes back to life. She comes back to life.
There's another thing that I think is really, he says to the people, she's not dead, she's asleep. And
Yep.
I think that is a hint that he's saying, look, that's all death is, really. It is just a sleep before eventual resurrection.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm 100% convinced on this idea of soul sleep or whatever, but this is just consistently Jesus and Paul's favorite metaphor for what happens to us when we die. There are, scenes, Revelation, where the saints are before the throne of God, and there are, I know there are these other texts, but this is the consistent metaphor that's used is that we shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed, right? We won't all die, but we shall all be resurrected when Jesus comes back to
And
life,
it's
or comes
interesting
back.
Because in the Orthodox Church, you refer to people who are asleep in the Lord.
Yeah,
That's,
Yep.
that's very common. It's like,
Yep.
okay, they're waiting the final resurrection, but there they are.
I think I'm probably about to make a fool of myself, but I think, doesn't Jesus say the same thing of Lazarus? Doesn't he say that he's
Don't remember.
just sleeping? What? Yeah, I told him he was asleep, right? Yeah. I mean, this is just his kind of favorite. Right. Yep. The touch is also important here. So let's talk about uncleanness. What's the normal pattern for the transmission of uncleanliness? Contact, right? So clean touches unclean, and what happens? Becomes unclean. What's the Jesus pattern? The opposite, right? Jesus, if you want to get sort of like equation, traditionally clean plus unclean equals unclean, but Jesus plus unclean equals clean. Jesus is, Jesus is God, but in this text, I mean, the suggestion very clearly is that Jesus is so holy, so pure, so clean, that he cannot be defiled. That in fact, his purity, his holiness, if I'm clean and something else is unclean, and I touch that unclean thing, then what is stronger? The unclean thing, right? Because it makes me unclean. Jesus is flipping the script. His holiness, his cleanness is stronger than ritual impurity. He makes things. Yeah.
Then why was it important for him to find the woman?
What do you mean?
He said, "Who touched me?" And he's looking for the woman. Was there a reason why he didn't just go on his way?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that we're. I mean, my impression is he's just felt something happen, and he wants to understand it and know and speak to this person. I don't think it was the case. Maybe I'm wrong. But I don't think it was the case that he was walking around town and everybody he bumped shoulders with was instantly healed. Do you know what I mean? Like she touches him and something happens and he feels it and now he's trying to understand. I think he understands this would have required faith for things to sort of work this way, and now he wants to meet this person and address her and and talk to her, that sort of thing. So that's what I think. But I didn't. I guess I didn't. You said at the beginning. You said so, and I guess I didn't understand the connection. Did I answer your question, or did I at least get okay?
And maybe to let her know it's okay.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point as well. I mean, she is. I mean.
She was treated horribly.
Yeah, but I mean, she's an outcast from her family. She's an outcast from her friends. She's an outcast from the temple. She can't outcast from the synagogue. She can't worship. She can't do anything. The very fact that she's in this crowd is, in a sense, making them all unclean. Everyone that she bumps into, she is making unclean. If one person turns around and sees her, she's going to be shamed, mocked, maybe worse. But she is risking this all just to touch Jesus because she's heard about him. To Mary Lou's point, she's heard that he can make her well, and she's She's out of option. Karen, you had a mic and then you just gave it up. So did you?
Oh.
Oh.
But I have a little bit more I can add.
Okay.
Her life for 12 years was basically hell. How do you buy food? You got to do your laundry miles away.
Yeah.
I mean, you're an outcast in family. You have no ties to other people. So I think when she touched him, he felt more than just the bleeding. She kind of
She felt
felt
the
her anguish, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, he's clearly well aware that something has happened. She feels the healing in her body, but he's quite well aware that something has happened. Yeah, John?
Well, I think you're just emphasizing, too, the fact that, like we touched on earlier, that he could have said nothing.
Jesus?
Yes. But it was important for him to let his disciples know, hey, something just happened, and you need to know about this. And everybody around needs to know about this. I mean, it's like the lesson thing. He's teaching them of why he was there.
Yeah.
And what he was doing. And it gets into the same thing when he goes to Jairus' daughter. The people started laughing at him. But he actually, it's a little confusing slightly for me, but he goes, why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is dead but sleeping. It's almost... not dead, I'm sorry, is not dead, but sleeping. He's almost like mocking them, and I obviously could be wrong about that, but he's just saying, I mean, how would the people even think she was sleeping? You know, and I'm not sure what the message is he's trying to get by his words, why are you making a commotion and weeping?
Yeah, I think you're not wrong. You know, one of the... so Jesus was like lots of things, obviously, right? Like I often get sort of annoyed when people are like, well, was he this or was he that? And it's like, well, he's lots of things. He's prophet, he's priest, he's king, he's God in the flesh, but one of the options is there is this kind of model of, I'm blanking on the name now, I apologize, but basically like a person who went around kind of sarcastically trying to sort of get people to open their eyes and see the world differently. Yeah. Model off of that, for sure, absolutely. So I think we're right to hear a bit of like, I don't know if I'd call it mocking, but sort of his like I think if you're doing the Walking with Jesus stuff, you might have noticed a couple days ago I used the word hyperbole a few times. Like I think there's lots of things in the Gospels that we read flat out as if like sort of on a flat literal level, where Jesus is just clearly speaking hyperbolically, where here Jesus is sort of clearly kind of using sarcasm to try to make a point. I mean, could you imagine how startling this would be? I mean, you're right. Like, you've seen death probably time and time again. You know what it looks like. You have a ritual for it. And someone walks up and says, like, what are you doing? She's not dead. She's sleeping. Like, it would be jarring. Like that's kind of the point. It's supposed to jar you, and I think to ask, what does the world look like? Like we are used to the world in its like normal course of events. What could the world, or what does the world look like when Jesus is present? And suddenly death isn't death anymore, it's sleeping. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. If we were reading this in the book of Matthew, we would say, he's saying, this is the kingdom.
Yeah.
It's here with you. This is what it's like.
Yeah. When he's present, the normal course of events change, and people should react accordingly or behave accordingly or something like that. But yeah, Mary Lou.
I read the story of the woman who had the issue of blood a little bit differently, that Jesus calls her out. Not that he was really wanting to know who this was. I think he knew who it was in his spirit, but he wanted to call her out in front of everyone that in this public arena where people would have known her, he didn't want her to be treated poorly, and he declared to everyone that she was healed.
Yeah.
And so he gave honor back to her in front of everyone.
Yeah, that is a like whether we're not really given either way motives for why Jesus asked her that question, but you're absolutely right about what he does for her is a public declaration of her that she's been healed. In fact, it's fascinating because she's already been healed. And then he pronounces healing afterwards. Because he's not doing it for her, to your point. He's doing it for everybody listening, to tell her. And that's another side of this to keep in mind. Again, these two stories, that's why, you can see why I think that is, while Matthew and Luke are okay kind of tearing apart Mark's sandwiches, they just sort of couldn't hear because they just go together so well. On the one hand, you have this woman who is culturally despised, right? Who is an outcast in basically, every sense of the word. And guess what? Jesus' healing power is for her. On the other hand, you have Jairus in Capernaum with, I think I read that there was maybe 200 people in this town. He's the chief of the people, at least in the synagogue, in regards to the synagogue, right? He has this sort of place of authority. He's probably well respected and probably affluent enough to fund the maintenance of the synagogue and all those sorts of things. And Jesus' healing power is available to him too, right? Jesus' ability or power over disease and death is not limited by anybody's social standing or by their wealth or by whether they're the in crowd or out crowd, whether they're part of the community or outside the community. We see here two very different people, someone who is an outcast in every sense of the word and someone who is a well-respected figure within their community. And Jesus' healing power is available to both of them. And then to further Mary Lou's point, she's already healed. Jesus, for presumably her own benefit, pronounces her healed, which is a whole problem in and of itself because nobody can do that but the priests in the temple. And there was supposed to be a whole ceremony that goes with it, and you go and you wash yourself, and then a priest could declare you clean. We see there's another healing. So, go present yourself. Jesus just declares, which means that what? Like, he's the temple. He's now the place where God resides. He's the place from which healing and cleanliness flow out into the world rather than the other direction. He is extending that mercy, that power to the outcast and to the well-to-do alike. We'll go here and then here. Yeah.
Two things. It would just strike me. One, although the healing doesn't depend on the personal relationship, but it seems that Jesus wants the personal relationship too. It's not just okay, you're healed, off you go. He doesn't just let it slide. He just wants to talk to the person who he has healed. Yeah. The other thing that's interesting, though, is the first healing is very public. It's announced, it's pronounced. Second one, he says, don't tell anybody, which is very odd.
Yeah. I think you're always asking me questions to make me think. I think resurrection is like a whole different. They're obviously related, but there are lots of stories. The story of Elisha and the Shunammite woman stands out because it's so unique, right? This is difficult for our kind of modern, postmodern minds, not non-pre-modern minds. But the idea of healers was just not as kind of controversial or unique as resurrector or someone who could bring life back to the dead. That was God's prerogative alone. Yeah. So I think that's the difference. I think the difference is that one is okay. I mean, it's controversial. Him pronouncing her clean can cause problems, but it's not as problematic as, oh, this guy just, is he practicing necromancy? Like, there's just all kind of questions that go along with it. Yeah, John?
I know when I read this, I see the true Israelite who crossed the sea twice. And upon crossing the sea, basically...
So you're going like New Exodus, like they had to cross the Red Sea and the Jordan, so that's why he does 2 sea crossings?
I mean, in verse 1 and verse 21, it's Mark wants us to know that.
Yeah.
And when he crosses the sea twice, the result is purity law is no longer in effect. He doesn't. There's no cleaning in the Jordan, in the river. There's no sacrifice being offered. Leviticus is completely ignored. Instead, he says, "No, I got this. You're clean. You're healed."
Yeah.
That would tick off the temple leadership, and then we see the other instance is that even the leader of the temple, the one who manages the day-to-day, the one who is very well respected in the community to have that position, the temple can't even save his daughter, right? Like the temple system is completely useless. It has become so corrupt. It has become so defunct that that in Jesus, God is making the point that this is Israel's vocation, because also I'm wondering what effort was made by the temple to help this woman.
Yeah.
There is protocol in Old Testament law to attempt to pray, to offer. And we see that she was left alone, right? That she was driven out, completely disregarding their call and covenant that they themselves made with the one true God. And then we also see that Jesus, not only does he show his power, but he's also showing his authority, but he's also showing his role. He's redefining or reminding Israel of who they are, and he's also giving us an example to follow of what it means to resist the evil systems and wicked ways of this world.
Yeah.
And that means we don't ask permission. We don't need permits. We don't wait for any permission to love our neighbor at all costs. We don't, it doesn't matter what leaders we disrupt. It doesn't matter what leaders that we may make angry because their power is threatened, because we serve him alone. That's what I get.
That's all good. I love the idea of the 2 crossings. It is odd that Mark includes that sort of, they had crossed again the boat to the other side. I'm down for all of that, pretty much. I'm down for all of that. That's good. And I think, to your point, this story is clearly communicating, exactly what you said, that the temple structures, the purity structures have failed. But I don't think you were in here yet, but what we said at the beginning, that like this section, Mark uses healing stories to make comments on the people and sort of the state of Israel, and that if the framing of the way section by 2 healings of blindness means that the people are blind and need to have eyes that see to understand what's going to happen when Jesus dies and rises again, then this seems to be suggesting that the state of the people is one of uncleanness, which would mean, to your point, that the system hasn't worked, that it hasn't done the thing it was supposed to do. It has left her in this perpetual state, and now Jesus, who is Israel in person, God in person, is going to come up and do what Israel should have but never did for this woman. I don't think the temple, I don't think the temple was sort of known for resurrection or bringing people back to life, which suggests that, as Jesus says, sort of someone even greater than the temple is here, right? Like, yes, I can make you clean like the temple, but actually I can do even more for you, right? I can give you life back once it's left your body. So, Yeah, that's all good. What else? We got like 9 minutes here. I thought I saw a hand up earlier. John?
I want to add, I'm taking us right to the end where Jesus tells the parents of the girl that he's just resurrected not to tell anybody. That isn't my question, really. He then told them to give her something to eat. Is this just a human thing that, oh, okay, this girl's been dead for a little while, she's probably hungry now? But I'm wondering
Yeah.
if there's some
No, I mean,
theological connection here to something.
I don't. I mean, I do think it's theological, but I'm not sure. Maybe it's as theological as some other things. But when Jesus is resurrected, he eats, right? Like eating is one of the most human things that we can do. Like it's the ancient Near Eastern world, the Greco-Roman world, was well acquainted with the idea of kind of apparitions and spirits and, ghostly type figures, so to speak. And the New Testament is unambiguous that what happened to this girl and what happened to Jesus and Lazarus was bodily resurrection. She didn't just appear to be alive. She wasn't a disembodied spirit who was now hanging out with her father and haunting his house. She was alive again bodily, and she did the most natural thing that people do. They eat.
There's a difference, though, that both this girl and Lazarus were not resurrection in the sense that Jesus was.
Correct.
There was not that transformation.
Yeah.
In creation, they were reinstalled in the
Yeah.
creation,
So.
and each of them was going to die again sometime.
Yeah. So if we want to be like super kind of technical, which I'm good with, I'm not critiquing it, but like the proper language probably like they were resuscitated, and Jesus was resurrected. If resurrection means back to life in the new creation, never to die again, then there's something else. But it's the same. At least in both of them is the giving life back, even if one is temporary and one is permanent. But yes, Lazarus and the little girl are resuscitated or something like that, and Jesus is and Jesus is resurrected into the revived and resurrected into the new creation. So.
With the eating, just to show them, the sarcastic ones outside. See, she really was sleeping.
Well, I mean, I'm sure it's. I think it's for her benefit, for everybody's benefit, right? It's just go do the normal sort of thing, right? You wouldn't. I think of like the ghost haunting, like nearly headless Nick in Harry Potter. He can't go feast with the kids at the table, right? But they try to like grab stuff and they go through it. Maybe I'm not remembering that entirely well, but you know what I mean. Like the idea that she can grab something, she can eat. She's not a disembodied spirit. She is a real person. Her parents can see that. Everyone that was mourning can see this. It's again to Mary Lou's point about the woman. It's very public. Like there's no. The fact that she is alive again is public. What happened, how it came about, is private. Like, don't tell anybody. But the fact that she was once dead and now is alive is public. Anybody want to talk about the fact that he speaks in Aramaic? Like why this is kept? I mean, it's just again for those people who want to like make the claim that the Gospels aren't eyewitness testimonies or that they are sort of fabrications from the early church. They wouldn't just randomly insert Aramaic words into here. There seems to be, like, I make the case when Paul maintains the Aramaic Abba in Romans, for as holy pronounced that we might cry Abba Father, that Paul is referring to the Abba prayer. He's referring to our Father, because that prayer had become well known, and it would have started with Abba in Aramaic. I don't know that there's the same type of reasoning here, but this is, again, if you ever wonder what language did Jesus speak, this is probably Exhibit A or one of the Exhibit A's. We're up there with the top of he speaks in Aramaic, not in Greek, not even in Hebrew necessarily. Talitha is a term of endearment. It's based off the Aramaic word for lamb. So he's saying, like, little lamb, rise up. This is the same type of language he would have used to wake Lazarus from the dead as well, right? This is the same, but using the Aramaic here smacks of eyewitness testimony. It smacks of someone who was in the room, who heard this, and the words stuck in their brain. It leaves a sense of a deep impression that these words stayed there. I think the point was made earlier, like, this is not a magical formula. Jesus is just telling her, little lamb, it's time to rise. Interesting enough, remember Peter in Acts raising Dorcas? Is that right? Yeah. He says Tabitha cum. He has the exact same word, except for one letter is different. Instead of Talitha, he has Tabitha, which again shows that Acts is very clearly trying to parallel the stories of Jesus and Peter and Paul with the story of Jesus, which inadvertently, I think, suggests a much earlier date for Acts than most people want to give it, because if you're making that case and both of them died at the hands of the Roman Empire, why would you not have included that story if you were writing it so far after their death? It suggests very strongly to me that Acts is written while Peter and Paul are still alive, which pushes all the dates of the rest of the books much, much earlier than most scholars want them to be. But did I see a hand pop up? We have like 2 minutes. Was it Ted? No? We're good? Yeah.
One observation that he calls the woman daughter, which can also be an endearment.
Yeah.
Endearment.
Yeah.
And how, again, daughter connects with this being the daughter of Jairus, and then Jesus using the term of, little one. So just kind of connecting them.
Yeah, I mean, again, Jesus comes off very human, full of compassion, full of tenderness, right? He's not angry that this woman touched him. He's not upset that power has gone out from him, or whatever. He's human, he's tender, he's compassionate, he's loving. And I think, like with Lazarus, I'm kind of reading that into this a little bit, but I think his heart breaks for the state of his people, for the diseases that affect them, for their uncleanliness, and for the fact that all of this eventually leads to death. And he understands that his mission has come to undo that, right? So it's a great question to ask. Like, how can we imagine, how would we imagine the world? Right? We're so used to the natural processes of this world. How do we imagine the world would look if Jesus was present? Right. That's kind of the question this is asking. That he's sort of asking the people who are mourning, and in his presence, disease flees, and even death is defeated. All right. So let's close in prayer. Again, I apologize. Forgot to print next week's handout, but they will be online. If you have any trouble finding them and you want one, please let me know, and I'll make sure you get one. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity again to study your word, to see this incredible story of disease and death succumbing to the power and authority of your Son, Lord. Give us eyes to see what the world looks like when he is present in his midst and in its midst, and eyes to see the systems around us that have failed, the uncleanliness in our lives, in our world, and know that he is the answer, and his holiness and his cleanliness will flow from him into the world around us, and eventually make all things clean and all things new. And we ask the same of your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.